Does stroke recovery stop after the first year? Today I'm going to definitively answer that question, so let's get into it. If you've ever watched any of my other videos, you know that I tend to be pretty calm, relaxed, and positive. But I'm gonna be honest with you all, this question burns me up. I have heard from way too many stroke survivors that their healthcare providers have told them that stroke recovery stops after 6 months or a year. So I would like to go ahead and bluntly shut this down. The answer is no. Stroke recovery doesn't stop after the first year. Now, I could end this video here and you all would have your answer, but I think it's important that we dive a little deeper and understand why this is the case. Why does stroke recovery continue after the first year? And why do some people say that it stops after the first 6 months to a year? So to better understand it, we need to dig into the 3 phases of stroke recovery and what happens in each of them, because that's where people are getting some of their information and what they base that assumption on. So the 3 phases of stroke recovery are the acute phase, the subacute phase, and the chronic phase. And it's in that second phase, that subacute phase, where people tend to make that assumption. So let's go ahead and dig in. After a stroke first happens, this is called the acute phase, or phase number 1. And this is typically the first few days to the first few weeks right after your stroke. Now, in this phase, typically a stroke survivor is in the hospital. You might be being stabilized, but once you're stabilized and you're able to tolerate therapy, the optimal way to go would be to be transferred to a rehabilitation facility. And that may happen within that first few weeks. However, we know that unfortunately many of our global healthcare systems are less than optimal and pretty broken. So more often than not, stroke survivors go without getting the appropriate amount of therapy they need. After the acute phase, you move into the second phase, which is the subacute phase. Now, this typically takes place in the first 3 to 6 months following the stroke. And it's also when stroke recovery gets very interesting and why a lot of people say that it is the crucial time period for stroke recovery. And there's a couple reasons why people say that. The brain goes through 2 different processes called spontaneous recovery and heightened neuroplasticity. Whoa, those are a mouthful. I'm going to break those down so that we can better understand what's going on in this subacute phase that causes people to say that. So let's start with spontaneous recovery. It's kind of what it sounds like. It's when recovery takes place of certain abilities, maybe cognition, speech, or physical abilities that come back online without a lot of rehab process. It happens spontaneously. And there are a few different reasons why this happens. So what's happening in the brain? Well, the area of the brain that has been impacted by the stroke, where the brain cells have died, that is called the core. However, there is another area around the core where the brain cells have died, and it is called the penumbra, a very weird name. But the penumbra is made up of damaged brain cells that have been impacted by the stroke but didn't necessarily die as a result. So what's going on here in the penumbra is that as inflammation starts to go down in the brain, as blood flow is bringing oxygen back to that damaged area of the brain, some of those damaged brain cells come back online. And that's when you see some of that spontaneous recovery. You may want to think about it like this. Picture that there's a big storm going on outside your house, and all of a sudden the electricity goes off. And after the electricity goes off, the lineman, the electrician, has to go out to the power line and fix the damage that's causing the power outage. Well, when the electrician finishes that, the light and the power comes back on in your home. So the storm, which is causing the power outage, is like the stroke. The electrician and fixing that power outage is like the penumbra and the damaged cells coming back online. The lights coming back on is like that spontaneous recovery. So someone might experience a quick return of some of their functions in the first 3 to 6 months because of that spontaneous recovery. Now, I also mentioned a second process that happens called heightened neuroplasticity. Now, heightened neuroplasticity means that the brain is very quickly and very easily adapting and molding to these changes. It's like, when we're kids, we have really heightened neuroplasticity because we are learning so much, and our brain is having to quickly make pathways or recreate pathways so that we can retain everything that we've learned. It's a similar experience in the first 3 to 6 months after a stroke happens. But after a stroke, those brain pathways have been damaged. So the heightened neuroplasticity allows the brain to work more quickly. It allows the brain to adapt to those changes a lot faster. And that's why some people say that this is the crucial period of stroke recovery, because of the heightened neuroplasticity and the spontaneous recovery that's occurring in the subacute phase. And I don't want you to get me wrong here. I think that it's incredibly important to use and capitalize on those processes that are happening. But what I don't want anybody to get confused about is to think that after that time period passes, that you're just out of luck, because we know that that's not true. What does end up happening is that process, the spontaneous recovery and the heightened neuroplasticity, start to slow down. It's not to say that it stops completely, it just slows. So you may be seeing slower progress versus that very quick progress that you may have been seeing during that time period. And this brings us to the third phase, also known as the chronic phase. And this includes the time after the 6-month mark. But the chronic phase also encompasses any time after that, 1 year, 5 years, 20 years, doesn't matter, it's all considered part of that chronic phase. And like I mentioned, this is also the phase when those two processes, spontaneous recovery and heightened neuroplasticity, start to slow down. But I think it is very important to note here that you can make progress at any point after your stroke. Don't let someone tell you that just because the fastest recovery may happen in the first 3, 6 months up to a year, it doesn't mean that you'll stop making progress after that year mark. And while new evidence and research is showing up and supporting this idea that stroke recovery extends outside of that 6-month to 1-year window, anecdotally, I have seen this over and over again. I have worked in teletherapy, outpatient rehabilitation, home health care, and skilled nursing rehab. And I have worked with people who are years out from their stroke and continue to make progress. I can't say that everyone is going to get back to 100% of where they were before their stroke. That's just something I can't guarantee. But what I can say is that if you put in the work, you put in the time, you put in the effort, progress is still possible no matter how far you are out from your stroke. I hope that this information has given you the confidence to know that you can still make progress in your own recovery journey regardless of how long ago your stroke was. And if someone wants to come up to you and tell you that you're stuck where you are, you'll know better, and you can tell them where to go. All right, everyone, that's it for today. I would love to hear from you. If you feel comfortable sharing, leave me a comment down below and let me know. Did somebody ever tell you that your recovery would stop after the first year? How did that affect you? How did it make you feel? And could you tell a difference in your recovery process? And if you will, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel. I noticed that 75% of the people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed. And with more subscribers, it helps me to reach the global community of stroke survivors. So it helps me immensely when you subscribe. And as always, I am leaving a link down in the description below to sign up for my free email list, which gets you 3 stroke recovery tips and motivational emails a week, as well as a copy of my ebook, The Stroke Recovery Pocket Guide. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.